Ahoy! I am finally back, and today, before the patch comes out that is now finally announced for later today, I wanted to give you guys a last opportunity to buy and sell some of the items that I think will change in value with next patch. Before we do that, a thanks to those of you who wrote nice comments under my recent video where I was talking about feeling sick. Thank you very much. I read all of them. I wasn't able to respond at the time. Feeling better now, so we're getting back to the usual, but thanks a lot. I much appreciate that. We have a lot to cover today, so let's jump straight into the items. Now, all of these items I talked about on my Patreon previously, where I give out early trading advice, and I was planning to make a video for this before the patch releases, and then I got sick, so now it's coming right before the patch releases, and obviously the prices are not going to be as good anymore as they were a few weeks ago. Sorry about that, but if you're on Patreon, then you were informed anyways. But there's still some money to be made here, I believe, or at least some money to be saved. So let's start with the things that I would recommend buying before the patch. The first thing is low quality tallow. Accuracy is gonna be stronger on the musket now, and even though I think with the changes that came throughout PTR, it's not strictly necessary to have accuracy on every musket build, I do believe that in many situations, in order to have the old musket effectiveness, so to speak, you will want this perk. So for those, this will be useful, and if it's at a reasonable price on your server, not too expensive yet, then it's definitely worth stocking up on a few of them. Likewise, obviously, there are going to be a lot of people that will be running fire staffs in the next patch, so getting some timeless fire staff shards is definitely a good idea if they're at a good price. And along with that, you obviously also want to get the craft mods, for example, the steel fire staff charm for refreshing pillar of fire, or the orichalcum fire staff charm for empowering fireball. There are also other charms that are useful. This is just the general idea here. And on the topic of charms, it's definitely worth looking at Void Gauntlet charms as well, because with the grid changes, making it so that 300 Con now provides grid, Void Blade can get grid, and the Void Gauntlet also got some other changes to the right tree as well, so a lot of those might be interesting, especially like the all-time favorites like Nullifying Oblivion or Putrefying Scream should definitely be useful if there are generally more people using Void Gauntlets again, so I can see that being a potential market. Elemental Aversion is most definitely going to be more valued next patch. How much more we'll have to see, but with that the price of armor fragments may change. Armor fragments are not super hard to farm or rare, so don't pay too much for these, but getting a few before they get super hot if you want to craft a little bit could be useful. You can do the same thing for armor scraps as well, which are generally cheaper for physical aversion, but you won't need as many pieces of physical aversion, so the value here will overall stay a little bit lower, I expect. Also, the upcoming Springtide Bloom event features a gear with physical aversion and cooldown reduction and a high chance to roll resilient, so if that's what you're after, you don't actually need armor scraps for it. If you have a lot of storage space, an absolute moneymaker next patch will be wooden coin. That's because there is a new recipe to turn wooden coin into charcoal, and you just need 1 coin to get 10 charcoal. And any price I've seen for wooden coin so far has been significantly below that, mainly because there's just not enough storage space to keep enough wooden coins to make a lot of money off this. So if you are someone who smelts a lot and you just want to have charcoal, that's a very easy way, or if you happen to have a lot of storage space, then just mass buy these and convert them and flip them and sell them a little bit later, and you will be making money for sure. It's not the biggest flip in the world, but a very guaranteed profit. If Shard of Niter is cheap on your server, it's worth picking up a few of those, because both in PvE we will need flame protection for the next expedition, as well as in PvP it will be more valuable because of the changes to the fire staff and blunderbuss still being strong. That said, there are other pathways to build your gear. I talked about that in a previous video, which I'll link right here if I remember, and that includes thrust protection rather instead. So that could also be something that could be good at Perfect Corrupted Sigil, and usually those are not particularly expensive to begin with, but just having a few might not be a bad idea. There is a small chance that Smoldering Armor Shard will be valued, because you can roll this with Elemental Aversion and Resilient, so you'd have a very defense-focused item, but that really depends on how the meta develops, and I don't think it's going to be that fire-heavy that people will actually end up doing this. In that case, the value for armor shards would go up, and they're pretty cheap on most servers at the moment, so might be worth considering. If they are reasonably priced on your server, I would highly recommend stocking up on Iron Guardsman Insignias as well. There's a good chance they will get more expensive next patch because of some of the ways that crafting in general is changing, and also because people will be crafting more again. And similarly, Golden Scarrows will probably also go up in value at least a little bit, because they're very, very cheap right now when no one was crafting. So getting them now should be cheaper than getting them tomorrow. There are also a few items that I would recommend selling. The first one is powerful Oak Flesh Balm, and by extension also powerful Gemstone Dust. You probably want to keep a few still because you might need them for walls and stuff, but if you have a very large amount of them, it might be worth selling them off and then buying them back later, because they will now be in Arcana chests and tier 5 Arcana chests. So you will actually get a few of these just by farming the world, and that will probably drop their value quite a fair bit, which is good because they were ridiculously expensive, to be honest. Drop of Ironwood Sap will probably also see a drop in price, because Thwarting Strikes will not be as valued, as it will only really be effective for people who have 300 con, as the perk is going away from 300 strength, the guaranteed grit on your lights and heavies. So I think it will still be useful, but only for a handful of players, and there aren't as many 300 con players in general. So we will see a shift here in value. And that applies to other items like whetstones, for example, as well. That will probably go up a bit in return. Squirming Vines for Shirking Fortification is dropping pretty hard, and you may want to sell that now. But at the same time, you may also want to hold on to it at this point, because it may just be too late. Because as it stands, Shirking Fortification is gonna be less valuable, but at least in heavy and maybe even in medium, it should be okay-ish still. So there might be a bit of a return to Shirking Fortification later down the road as well. Not completely, and it's probably not going to outclass Elemental Aversion, but still, I think we could see people being like, hey, actually, this is not completely bad and a lot cheaper now, so let me craft some of those. Lasting Consumption is currently only available on bags with 600 gear score, and so they are a pretty good way to make money. That will still exist, but as you can see here, there is now items with perk. One of the quests from the next season, from the Season 1 quest line, provides you with a bag with Lasting Consumption. It's not a great bag overall, but it has Lasting Consumption, and that's the priority for most people, which I think might push the value of bags with Lasting Consumption in general down a little bit, because there will be a little bit less demand. So if you sell now, you probably get a little bit more than you would later down the road. Shard of Consecrated Iron had its drop table fixed and will now drop from mobs above level 45 as well, so Freedom will be much easier to come by, and as such the value of that craft mod will be going down for sure. Now, when we looked at all of the items here on New World Database on nwdb.info, there is also another website that I want to recommend when it comes to looking at prices on the market specifically, which is nwmarketprices.com. If you are wondering if any of the items I just talked about is actually worth it on your server, or maybe already expensive or very cheap compared to others, then this is the place to go, because you can see here, if you look up any items, how the price of the item has changed over time, and if it's comparatively expensive or cheap right now. So based on that, you can make a better decision if it's worth buying or not. Aside of all the resources I've shown you here, there are also some others that are worth buying for the new upcoming Springtide Bloom event if you want to speedrun it a little bit. I will link that video right here. I talk about the resources in there. And other than that, we have plenty more to talk about today when it comes to New World news and the upcoming patch and making a summary and all that. So that's what I'll be working on. If you're interested in seeing that, you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you get notified. And thanks to my patrons for supporting this video and carrying me over the time that I was sick. See you for the next one later today. Duke Sloth, out.